This service is recorded in McKillop United Church, Lethbridge, Alberta, on Easter Sunday, 1988. The minister is Dr. Lawson. The sermon theme is "Oh, for a Closer Walk with God." He's back in the land of the living, the man we decided to kill. He's standing among us forgiving our guilt on Good Friday Hill. He calls us to share in his rising, to abandon the grave of our past. He offers us present and future, a world that is open and vast. Today is Easter, the day of the resurrection, which conjures up pictures of those medieval paintings of Jesus emerging from the tomb and confounding all his enemies by his risen splendor. But there's nothing in the Gospels to support that picture. In fact, Mark's Gospel, which Gloria read today, which is the earliest of the Gospels, ends something like a disappointment. It's almost anticlimactic the way it ends. The people went to the grave, we hear. They met this young man dressed in white who said to them, "Don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, but he is gone. He has risen. Now go and tell the disciples and tell Peter to go to Galilee, and there you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and ran from the grave, because fear and terror was upon them, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And that's the end. That's how the oldest manuscripts end the story. Some of the later manuscripts have got an additional ending, but that's how the best manuscripts, the oldest ones, end, right there. And it sounds anticlimactic because after the tremendous ministry of Jesus, after the events of Holy Week, after all that has happened, surely there should have been some great climax of the risen Lord coming out with the hallelujah choruses, and instead we have the women said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Well, I don't need to tell you that scholars faced with a literary puzzle like this, because Mark obviously knew about all these appearances of Jesus, but he doesn't say anything. And so scholars faced with a literary puzzle like this have for centuries produced theory after theory to account for this abrupt ending. I asked Joy the other night what she thought had happened, and without hesitation she said, "Oh, the ending was torn off and lost." And sure enough, that's one of the scholarly theories. And there's many, many others also. But you know, I think the way it is exactly the way Mark intended it to be. It's a sort of unfinished gospel, because now this Jesus has gone, and I think it's for us to write our account of the living Christ and finish off Mark's gospel. And you know, I had to do that just less than a month ago. I had to give my account. Here I was standing in the middle of Beijing, the capital of China, formerly Peking, which has been a capital city, you know, 1,000 years before Jesus was born. It was a capital. Before David or Solomon or anyone, it was already a capital city. And so here we are with our delightful, charming, very well-informed Chinese guy, Tiang, who asked me about our group. Now, up till now, she has revealed very, very little interest in our group, nor has she revealed anything of her own personal life. But now she's getting to know us, and she's saying to me what a good group we are. She likes us, I think, because we're easy to get along with. We're not gripers, we're not complainers. We have a genuine interest in and appreciation for the strange and exciting and strange land and its people. And she also thinks we are lucky. You are a lucky group, she tells me. For here we are in northern China, and I purposely set up the itinerary that we will start there with the same kind of weather conditions that we have in Alberta, because it's similar, and we take along our clothes, and we're thinking that once we've been there and had the cold weather, we can pack away our woolies and work our way down south through Hong Kong and Bangkok, Penang, till we're finally within 100 kilometers of the equator at Singapore. But we don't need our winter woolies. There, even on the day when we climbed the Great Wall, we could stand there on the top with light clothing on and experience a nice spring day like we'd have in Lethbridge with our beautiful, refreshing breeze. And even at the top, it was nice. And when I say climbed the Great Wall, I mean it. You know, some tourists that you see pictures of, and royalty and cabinet ministers, heads of state, you see them going for a Sunday stroll on the walk. But that won't suit the McKillop group. They've got their eyes on the highest reaches there, and nothing less than conquering those high battlements and lofty crests will survive. So off we go, and the Bear's Hump at Waterton has nothing in steepness and far less in height than our lofty goal. And after much peching and hilarity, we stand on the lofty ramparts never attained by Genghis Khan or Attila the Hun or Marco Polo or Hagar the Horrible, and we feel like Hillary on Everest, or my friend Carol who climbed Kilimanjaro a few summers ago. And so here we are, and in Tsang's eyes, we are a lucky group. Perhaps she thinks, like people around here, of course, that we must be doing something right, that somebody up there likes us. There were some difficulties in my conversation with her. One was when I told her who we were, that we weren't a group of millionaires, that we were a group of ordinary people who had come to a time in their lives where they were willing to spend their money and go on a lifelong dream that's fulfilled by going to the Orient. She didn't say anything in response to that. It was as if she didn't hear me. For how could that be, when we have seen the ordinary people of China in settings and working conditions that existed in England a century and a half ago and raised the creative ire of Charles Dickens. Young Chinese women painting exquisite cloisonné objects of art in a drafty stone building with minimum comforts, which, if that building were located on one of our farms around here, the neighbours would say that's a poor shed indeed. But that's where they were working. While outside we would see women loaded like beasts of burden, carrying heavy loads balanced on a pole or pulling a cart. While at other times we watched in over 100-degree temperatures at them spinning, operating a loom manually when we could hardly stand in the heat, weaving beautiful silk, while other craftsmen and women were carving beautiful designs and pictures in teak and ivory. And these same handicrafts, Krosanow handicrafts, inlaid pearl, mother-of-pearl boxes, the works of hours of sweat and creativity, could be purchased for very, very little in the friendship stores. And the weaver's silk, when made into a tie, could be purchased for less than $2. And if you were a Scotsman, you could get it for $1, I can tell you. And even this one I'm wearing, I was bartering with a woman in the street, holding the tie in my hand, when suddenly she was up and gone, and the police were coming down the street, and so I got it for nothing. I did look for her. Not too much, but I did look for her, and actually another lady in another booth was going to take the money. She says, "I'm her friend." And I said, "Yes." She didn't get the money. However, how could she understand, this young woman, when many of the population around us are living in houses which were not as adequate as the miners' rows, those rural industrial slums of my childhood in Scotland, which were condemned 50 years ago? And she picks us up each morning in front of this hotel, which we deem as being simply adequate, but is the height of opulence by comparison to the roadside housing. The other difficulty with her question in response to my statement that most of us belong to a church, and I was the minister, I said, "Just call me Mao, I'm the leader." But she said, "Do you pray every day?" And now I was in real difficulty, not difficulty with the answer, but with her oriental concepts of to whom I would be praying and for what reasons. For you see, this charming young woman is a product of the People's Revolution. She's a child of the cult of Mao, who would sing every morning in school, "I love Peking's Tiananmen Square," just as American children will sing, "My country, 'tis of thee, and certainly never, Jesus loves me, this I know." Now, this is a godless society. 2 days ago, we have walked with impunity in the precincts of the Forbidden City, with its many beautiful temples, halls, and gates, now symbols of the faith of dead emperors, past emperors who lived in this opulent splendor and palaces, while the poor walked the streets in rags. And what were those temples for? Well, the names tell us their story. There was the gate of heavenly peace. There was the hall of supreme harmony, the temple of heavenly purity, the gate of heaven, earthly peace. There were places where you could pray for longevity, for fertility, and for virility. And here is the palace of peaceful old age. And could I explain to my inquirer, oh no, we don't pray for those pagan things, when indeed our prayers are full of such pleas. And here's the palace of contented, concentrated beauty. And I have visions of countless women in our society dancercising and exercising, dieting and jogging, doing all sorts of strange gyrations on the living room floor in front of the television set, devotees of Jane Fonda, the high priestess of the body beautiful, or the demon goddess of Vietnam, depending on your point of view. There is also the gate of divine military genius. And we who will travel in the lands of Kipling will see, if not the dawn coming up like thunder on the road to Mandalay, we will see the sun go down with thunder on the straits of Mandalay. And we remember his words in the old hymn, "Lest we forget, lest we forget." The words that say, "For heathen hearts that put their trust in reeking tube and iron shard, and not in thee to guard." We are quite relieved that these words are not in the new red hymn book, for we realize how hypocritical we are when we sing them every Memorial Day, having faith, and we do, in the God of the big battalions. For isn't God always on the side of the big battalions? And our massing of nuclear bombs is a clear statement of where our faith lies and where our trust is, in reeking shard and in iron tube, and certainly not in thee, our God. And now we are preparing to embark for the temple of heavenly harmony and its hall of prayer for a good year. And I look up at the number of our bus, which you always learn to do because it's the same as so many others, so that I'll be able to distinguish it. And you know, the number of the bus was 649. How can I explain to my young Oriental guide that we do not believe in magic or luck? No, we don't. Of course we don't. What can I say about the numbers of our church people who religiously and faithfully make their weekly pilgrimage to a decorated booth, there to make their offerings of their good, well-earned money to the great goddess of luck, who is known in our country by the numbers 649. Earnestly and fervently there they will pray that this great goddess will see fit to select them and lift them out from their present unfortunate state and usher them into the kingdom and the heaven of eternal bliss. And if we stop to pray at the hall for a good harvest, where once people gathered to try to control the weather, the rain, the grasshoppers, the frost, they'd be in good company with many in our part of the world who believe, yes, they believe in agricultural research, and we build great stations to the east of the city, but really they make nonsense of rational science by thinking they can indeed control the weather or insect infestations by prayer or by good living. Someone up there is being good to me. And later on we will visit the snake temple, where deadly pit vipers come in from the jungle to adorn the altar and hang around the candlesticks there, where the eggs are left for them to suck. And outside the joss sticks are burning, sending up their incense, each one with a prayer tied to it with a request to God. The snake handler, who is poking at these things while I'm taking pictures of him, wants to approach me as he does with a couple of these pit vipers, with the suggestion that he put them on my camera and he will take a picture of me for a small charge, of course. But I have a much, much better idea. I tell him he'll hold the snakes and I'll take the picture. I'll do it for nothing, which I do. And I have a nice picture of it. And I realize, of course, that I'm a man of little faith. For there are fundamentalist groups who handle snakes. For didn't Jesus say to his followers, "Behold, I give you authority to tread upon serpents and scorpions, and nothing shall hurt you"? And wasn't Paul bitten by a viper when he landed there in Malta, and the inhabitants waited for him to swell up or to fall down dead, and no misfortune came to him? And they said that he was a god. In another very, very rather humble setting in the middle of Bangkok sits a Buddha weighing 5.5 tons, all of pure gold. The story is that it was thought to be a stone Buddha, and that's why it's in such a humble setting. They were moving it to this unpretentious temple, a rather poor thing compared to the many splendid jewels that abound in Bangkok, when it cracked. And when the outer plaster was broken away, inside was a Buddha of solid gold, 5.5 tons of it. It's thought that sometime centuries ago, when invaders were coming, someone plastered over the Buddha so that the invaders wouldn't take it away. And then during the ages, it was forgotten until it cracked. But you see, our God, after all, our God has nothing to do with gold, until we see the millions being lamented as lost because the TV ministry scandals. And if our guide saw the crystal temple, what God would it conjure up for her? No doubt there already exists a temple for that God somewhere in the Forbidden City. There's a missionary hymn no longer in our hymn book with a couple of lines that I remember from my childhood. The heathen in his blindness bows down to wood and stone. Well, the heathen may be in his blindness bowing down, but really his faith, his hopes, his desires, what he wants from his God, be it in stone or wood or gold, is not different from the superstition and the credulity, the self-seeking and the materialism that abounds in our community under the guise and would be attributed to the work of Jesus Christ. And only the commandment, no graven image, has really differentiated. That's the only thing that has differentiated us from our Oriental neighbours, because much of what we do is indeed pagan and has little to do with the risen Christ. The ends that we have written to the Easter story, the picture and the power of Jesus we have taken into our hearts, are a far, far cry from the Jesus of Nazareth who told that woman at the well in Samaria, whose temple was on the nearby hill, "Believe me," he said, "the time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor on the mountain, that holy mountain in Jerusalem where the temple of Solomon stands. The time will come when you'll worship him neither here nor there. Those who worship the Father will worship him in spirit and in truth. For such the Father wills to worship him. For God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." Easter is a good time for us to examine the endings we have all written to the Easter story. And Garth Mundell has done us yeoman service in this, in getting us to examine who is the Christ, who is this Jesus that we worship and hold in our hearts. Have we made an idol of him? Have we fooled ourselves, and have we got the idol there instead of the living Christ? Have we got someone there who caters to our fears and our greeds, rather than someone who frees us from them? We must examine our faith stance, for all of us want a closer walk with the person who emerged from that tomb that day. The disciples met him in Galilee. We want to meet him in our daily lives. For in the words of another old hymn, our cry is, "Oh, for a closer walk with God, a calm and heavenly frame, a light to shine upon the road that leads us to the Lamb. The dearest idol I have known, whatever that idol be, help me to tear it from my throne and worship only thee." I haven't answered my little guide, and what I say to her will be my ending for the Easter story. Standing there in the middle of Beijing, I tell her that my religion has nothing to do with all these temples or idols or gates or halls. It's a way of life. And this she can understand because she has seen something of our way of life. My God lives in my heart, and his name is love. And as I live in love, I live in him, for God is love. After all, the only religious activity for the Christian, the only true worship, is to love God and our neighbor as ourselves. And if I do that, so shall my walk be close with God, calm and serene my frame. So purer light shall mark my road that leads me to the Lamb.